This video is brought to you by Dollar Shave Club. Goku Black. If I was to point to an aspect of Dragon Ball Super people would remember and argue over for many years to come, it's this chilling nightmare of a tale that plagued the timeline of future Trunks. Ruthless, heartless, and tenacious. This character, as quickly and suddenly as he appeared, became a favorite in the community. However, now years removed from the conclusion of this arc, I decided to ask my followers a question on Twitter. That question? The Goku Black arc. What did you think? The final tally saw with almost 4,000 votes cast, only 6% of people actively disliked it. However, if you look at the comment section for longer than a second, you'll notice a trend. The vast majority of comments, while positive, almost always came with a caveat, mainly concerning its ending. So today I want to figure out what exactly made the Goku Black arc so enjoyable to the majority, highlight where I think it might have gone wrong in places, all the while dissecting a character that has widely become known as Dragon Ball Super's best antagonist. This is the narrative nightmare, and its savior, Goku Black. In John Truby's book, The Anatomy of Story, he expresses that a story has a minimum of 7 key steps in its progression from beginning to end. This is used specifically to achieve a sense of flow, clarity, and pacing. These 7 steps are weakness and need, desire, opponent, plan, battle, self-revelation, and new equilibrium. And so, with reference to these 7 general steps, does the Goku Black arc work within them? Well, let's take a look. The story opens with a bang. It establishes 3 of the steps right out the gate: the opponent, the desire, and establishes a plan for our hero. As a result, the episode itself is fantastic in a myriad of ways. Its pacing is snappy, the visuals match the tone and themes of the arc, and the audience is given a goal. Many consider this to be one of, if not the best, Dragon Ball Super episode, capturing the audience's attention, immediately hooking them with the final visual before cutting to black. Specifically, this was achieved through establishing the desire of the story immediately. As author John Truby writes, desire is what your hero wants in the story, his particular goal. A story doesn't become interesting to the audience until the desire comes into play. In the very first episode, in the very first scene of this arc, the writers tell us without delay what our hero desires. He desires this horrible, shadowy figure to stop what it's doing. Because of this immediate, vital piece of information coming to our attention, as an audience we now become invested in the story immediately. So if this arc had a captivating opening while ticking many boxes along the way, why do so many people have issues with it after all was said and done? Well, a lot of people tend to focus on the logical and technical incoherence within the story's established time travel mechanics. In other words, they break the story's established logic. While time travel was clunky and convoluted in the Cell arc, it still technically made sense. However, in the Goku Black arc, it didn't. Now, to go into why it breaks its own rules for time travel would be a 40-minute video into and of itself. And truthfully, I think a story can still be fantastic even if it breaks its own internal logic occasionally. So instead of getting bogged down on that, I'd like to instead focus on the narrative issues itself. Speaking of which, to understand why I think this ending didn't work, we need to look at the final 2 steps of story structure established earlier, those being self-revelation and new equilibrium. These steps, in layman's terms, refer to the hero better understanding and coming to grips with who they really are as a person, and returning everything to normal with one major difference. The hero has changed. Oftentimes, this revelation of self comes about due to the pressure the opponent of the story implements during a battle. So where's the problem? Well, it's actually connected to what made the first episode so gripping. They established the desire of the story before everything else. You might have noticed that in the list of 7 key steps in story structure, there is one step before desire, and that is position number 1 for a reason. In John Truby's book, The Anatomy of Story, he writes, writers who know that the story doesn't galvanize the audience until the hero's desire kicks in sometimes get a little too smart for their own good. They think, I'll just skip the weakness and need step and start with the desire. They've just made a pact with the devil. Opening with desire gives your story a quick start, but it also kills the payoff, the ending of the story. In other words, the weaknesses and needs of a character are what make it possible for the character to change at the end. They are what makes the audience care. It enables there to be a satisfying conclusion. For example, in the 1991 horror thriller The Silence of the Lambs, the main character Clarice is inexperienced and suffers from haunting childhood memories, on top of living in a man's world. This is her weakness. Her need is to overcome the ghosts of her past and to gain respect as a professional in this male-dominated area. This comes full circle at the film's conclusion as Clarice grows as a professional, overcoming her weakness and achieves her desire to catch the serial killer she is pursuing. As a result, a new equilibrium is achieved. She has developed as a person, however Hannibal Lecter has escaped. Additionally, in order for the weakness and need step to work, the hero cannot be aware of this defect he possesses. Because if he is aware of it, the story is over. The change in the character is the story. The hero should become aware of this need right before the self-revelation after having gone through great pain and struggle, in this instance at the hands of the villain near its conclusion. In the case of future Trunks, he doesn't have a weakness or need that's established really. His need isn't that he needs Black gone, that's his desire. A character's need in this context is linked to his weakness. And there isn't a weakness that's established outside of him not being strong enough or believing that he and his timeline can handle it. Which, even if I was to assume that that was his arc for this particular story, it happens to be the same arc he underwent already during the Cell arc, which contradicts this quote by John Truby. He writes, "If he is cognizant of what he needs, the story is over." And so, because this is Trunks' story and is clearly showcased as a positive arc character, complete with early defeat and inspirational speech before rising to the occasion near the conclusion, the ending falls flat. I appreciate the speech Trunks delivers when pressured by Fuse Zamasu is inspiring, but he is very much a positive change arc character with no change. At the very least, no change he wouldn't have otherwise been aware of prior. To put it simply, this conclusion, while great to see Trunks get the W, is lacking and falls short because there is no meaningful change the character undergoes to rise to the occasion and save the day, resulting in nonsensical techniques miraculously being thrust upon him without it being earned, and a needlessly tragic conclusion making the entire journey pointless. However, with that said, it doesn't change the fact that only 6% disliked this arc when voting. So what made it work? But before I get into that, I want to take a second to thank Dollar Shave Club for sponsoring this video and for sending me their $5 starter set to review. Within this $5 starter set, I was expecting to be sent a razor to my house, which I did get and they were great quality, but what I didn't expect was to get 4 6-blade razors, a face cleanser, and a shave butter. This shave butter is a godsend because I genuinely suffer from razor burn and dry skin. This genuinely made this problem disappear. And if that wasn't enough, they deliver right to your door. So now on top of getting great quality, super affordable razors, I now don't have to keep using the same blunt razor cartridges for months because I keep forgetting to go to the store and get a new one. If any of this might interest you or you'd like to help out the channel, check out the link in the description and try it for yourself. It's only $5 and you get so much for it. Now back to the video. The concept of a character like Goku Black wouldn't have looked out of place amidst a library of preteen anime fanfiction. However, he was fantastic. In preparation for this video, I put up a second poll asking, which of these was your favorite Dragon Ball Super antagonist? I included Beerus, Hit, Jiren, and Goku Black as the options to choose from. And with 4.4 thousand votes cast, Goku Black won by a landslide, accumulating more than all the others combined. So how did he work so effectively? He's a fantastic example of what K.M. Weiland, author of Creating Character Arcs, calls the negative character arc. The first, in fact, for Dragon Ball, but that's a topic so big it requires its own video. To briefly explain what the negative character arc is, K.M. Weiland writes, "The negative change arc tells the story of a character that ends in a worse place than that in which he started. Just as in a positive change arc, the negative change arc hinges on the lie the character believes." A terrific example of a character that underwent a negative change arc in pop culture is Anakin Skywalker. While being brainwashed and manipulated by the dark side of the Force, he ultimately becomes Darth Vader. This negative change arc helped Goku Black and Zamasu stand out amidst the crowd of now defunct and forgotten Dragon Ball antagonists. Up to this point, Dragon Ball had been on a trend of utilizing villains that eventually became good or were evil to the core. Zamasu and Goku Black upset that trend by becoming Dragon Ball's first ever villain to undergo a negative change arc. On top of all of that, Goku Black and Zamasu are clearly villains that were designed to work perfectly within this particular story, specifically because they are pursuing the same goal as the hero, to protect life. However, they have different ideas of what it requires to achieve this goal, and thus, conflict ensues. As John Truby writes, if you give your hero and opponent two separate goals, each one can get what they want without coming into direct conflict, and therefore, you have no story. Because Goku Black and Trunks are pursuing the same goal, this creates a satisfying and organic reason for Trunks and Black to come into conflict. And despite the admittedly flawed but fun introduction to the series, it also delivered to us what I consider to be the single greatest character debut the entire series has seen. Not just Super, the entire series. Granted, the arc itself had many glaring flaws, some of which I covered today, but to claim that the arc has no redeeming qualities simply isn't a fair assessment in my book, thanks in no small part to this character. In an interview discussing the Goku Black arc itself, Akira Toriyama had this to say: I put together this story based on a suggestion from the editorial office. Like last time, I write an outline of the entire plot, then the scriptwriters break it up into episodes, expanding on things, changing things around, and adding in new bits as need be. Even I haven't checked the final script yet. There isn't anything definitive to glean from this quote specifically, however, if I was to speculate, I think there's a very good chance that Toei Animation approached Akira Toriyama to write a story about Trunks and an evil Goku specifically. And while not having any immediate plans for Trunks' character or how the story might end, Toriyama might have written a rough outline for this Dragon Ball story without very many specifics. Considering how extremely the arc in the manga deviated from the anime's interpretation using what I imagine were the same notes from Akira Toriyama, should give indication that the rough outline of events was largely incomplete, resulting in some great takeaways and some terrible. With that said, however, these are my closing thoughts. Zamasu and Goku Black have etched their own identities into the Dragon Ball mythos, carving out a story arc that has never before been seen or appreciated in Dragon Ball. Through dramatic and effective introductions, ruthless motivations, and an intensely desperate setting, the arc was ambitious and successful in enough areas to alleviate its lackluster and Deus Ex Machina rich conclusion. This arc has many problems, some of which are obvious and others maybe not so. But what is interesting is that despite all of the arc's issues and shortcomings, the characters introduced and established in this desperate tale possess enough personality and charisma to persuade even the most jaded viewers and readers, despite the at times incoherent nature of its narrative. The Goku Black arc reminds us that even the most confusing and fault-filled stories can still be thrilling adventures, full of tension, loss, and catharsis, as long as the characters weaving the tale tell it in an interesting way. Established within a narrative nightmare, Goku Black stands tall as one of Dragon Ball's most memorable and impressive villains. Thanks for watching.